We always hear about the number of billionaires who have built their wealth using real estate. But unfortunately, it's usually right before somebody is about to pitch us a real estate get-rich-quick scheme. But the reality of all those billionaires who have created their wealth using real estate is that almost none of them did it quickly, and certainly none of them did it overnight. In fact, in almost all of those cases, that real estate wealth was built over the long term by allowing gains to compound on themselves and using strategic risk management. And what most people don't realize is that there's an optimal way to invest in real estate that reduces your risk of going broke and allows you to reap the benefits over the long term. And if done properly, can almost with complete certainty create millions and millions of dollars worth of wealth for pretty much anybody. And that's what I'm going to show you in today's video, the optimal order to invest your money to create wealth using real estate. But before we get into it, my name's Nolan Matthias, and if you want to thrive financially, this is the place for you. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and hit the like button so more people like you can see this video. Okay, so there is an optimal order to invest in real estate that pretty much eliminates the majority of your risk of going broke while also virtually guaranteeing your success. And it's called the Evergreen Investment Pyramid. And what it does is it gives you a system to invest your money so that at each stage, as you get into riskier and riskier investments, the stages below are supporting the new ones. And if at any point one of the investments fails, you have the previous layers there as a backup, which, barring any catastrophic events, pretty much creates certainty that your investments will continue to thrive over the long term, making it an almost complete certainty that over time, you will generate considerable wealth. And yes, this is a long-term strategy. This is the long-term certain play. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. You aren't going to make $50,000 overnight or in the next year, but by the time you've built out your portfolio, you will have investments that can pretty much replace your income without any problem by the time you reach retirement. And that is really what this strategy is about. It is about making investments that replace income. It's not making investments to make income, it's making investments to replace the income that you have. And I'll show you how that works in a second. But let's start first by looking at the very first layer, which is building a scalable income. Now, I very much believe that everybody should have an income that doesn't have a ceiling. So in other words, an income where if your skills get better or the amount of time that you work increases, you will make more money. And I think this is hugely important, not just from an investing perspective, but also from an employment perspective over the long term. And if you're currently in a job that doesn't allow you to increase your income either by working on commission or working longer hours or putting in more effort, then I highly encourage you to start looking for a career where this is possible. Now, once you've found a scalable income, one that increases as you put in more effort or your skills get better, then you want to start taking advantage of your tax-free accounts or tax-advantaged accounts. So in a place like Canada, this could be an RSP or a TFSA. In the US, it could be something like a 401k or a Roth IRA. And you always want to make sure that you take advantage of any employer matching that is offered to you. 100% of the time, if it is being offered, you need to be maxing that out because it is the single fastest way for you to build wealth at an early stage. Now, you always want to take advantage of tax-free accounts first, so that's your Roth IRA or your TFSA, and then start looking at tax-deferred accounts, that's your 401k or your RRSP. The reason why is because we want to do everything to have the growth of our money be tax-free, because as it snowballs and gets bigger and bigger, that's where we're going to see the major advantages. And you want to do everything you can to max these out to the absolute limit. And again, if you aren't making enough money in order to max them out, try to find a scalable income or a side hustle that will allow you to get to those limits. Now, once you've got a reasonable amount of savings, obviously the next step is to buy a personal home. This is the home that you're going to live in. And if you're a first-time home buyer, you may want to look at this as your first rental property as well. So a property that you'll live in for a few years and then eventually turn into a rental. And the best types of properties to buy in this sort of scenario are ones that will be attractive to young professionals. Because when you do turn it into a rental, you want to find people that will rent it and pay their bills on a regular basis. Then when you go to upgrade to a bigger home, you simply do a refinance of some of the equity if you don't have enough money put aside for another down payment, and you buy that next home that's going to be your forever home, or at least something that you're going to live in for the next 5 to 10 years. Then once you feel comfortable with the cost of that personal home and the mortgage and all the expenses that go along with it, then you can start looking at houses and condos in order to buy, in order to turn into rentals as well. Now, there's typically a limit of how many of these you can buy, but it is usually around 4 to 5. And that right there, if you did no other steps in this process, would pretty much give you enough income to retire and replace your income indefinitely. But what you'll likely realize is that once you get 4 to 5 properties, they start to generate enough income to purchase more and more at a faster rate. Now, this is where you have to get strategic about how much debt you are taking on. For me, I personally like to take on no more than 65% loan to value on my entire portfolio. So in other words, if I own $1 million worth of properties, I only want to have $650,000 worth of mortgages. And then if the property values increase and the mortgages are paid down and I get down to a, let's say, 50% range, then I may go out and look for another property to top back up to 65%. Now, for those who have a higher risk tolerance, they may want to look at 75% or 80%, or those who have a lower risk tolerance may want to cap out at 50% loan to value. But the lower that you can get your amount of debt compared to the value of the properties, the more likely you are to be able to withstand any sorts of recessions or any sorts of issues that come up with those properties. And the key thing to remember here is that anytime you're paying down the debt and reducing the amount of debt relative to the total portfolio size, you're de-risking. And the more you can de-risk, the better. Now, let's say you get to that cap of how many properties that you can own that are single family homes. Then you want to start looking at apartment buildings. And these are basically multifamily homes. Maybe you start with a 4 or a 5-plex, or maybe a 10 to 15 unit building, and then you build on your portfolio from there. And once you've gotten used to owning a few apartment buildings, then it might start making sense to look at commercial real estate. So maybe strip malls or commercial or industrial areas. And the best types of properties for this are the types that have long-term tenants that will probably stick around for a very long period of time. And the holy grail of this in my mind would be the type of strip mall that has a grocery store and maybe a Starbucks or a McDonald's or some other sort of property that has an anchor tenant that people will recognize. Then, once you've got a few commercial real estate buildings under your belt, you can start looking at development. Now, the thing about developments is this is the type of real estate that people want to jump into right away. They want to buy a house, knock it down, build something else that's nicer. And unfortunately, the thing about developments is if you don't have all of the other layers in place prior to doing it, if something goes wrong, it's the single fastest way to see your net worth shoot past zero on the way down. Because the whole design of the evergreen investment pyramid is to have all of the other layers to support the next as you're doing them. So going straight into developing without having some apartment buildings or some houses and condos or a personal home in place doesn't make a ton of sense. Because it's those apartments and those condos and your personal home that will protect you if something happens in the development stage. Oh, and you don't necessarily want to clear out your investment accounts either in order to buy real estate. Because having liquid assets, things like stocks and bonds, in a tax-advantaged account could come in very handy if you ever have an emergency with any of your properties. And if done right, you want to see all of your investments grow at a similar pace. So you're not just invested in real estate, you're diversified into other types of investments as well. So if one is struggling, you've got the other as a backup plan. And what you'll notice about this is I'm not telling you to invest only in real estate. What I'm suggesting is that in order to be an investor, you need to be a smart investor. And that means diversifying not just in different types of real estate, but also into other types of investments as well. And as you can see, this is all about reducing your risk and playing the long game. If you can do those two things, there's almost complete certainty that you can be a millionaire within the next 10 to 20 years. And if you start early enough, you'll be way ahead of the game. Oh, and if you want to learn more about different types of real estate investments, make sure you check out this video here and the others like it. I've done a whole series of videos on different types of young people who have done really, really well investing in different types of strategies.